Okay, today we are talking about Kilayim. Okay, in Eretz Yisrael, there's all kinds of limitations of what kind of things you can plant next to each other. Excuse me. In the Chutz Arts, there's almost nothing that's usher. There's one thing that's usher d'Rabbanan, to plant grapes together with two other things at the same time. Mamash, like to plant them b'mapelos yad, mamash at the same time. That's only usher d'Rabbanan. But what we do have for Kilayim, midaraisa, even the Chutz, is you can't graft Minim one onto another. Okay, and I'll soon talk to you about what that means. But right now, I'm just going to give some basic ideas, and then we'll move into more complicated things or more lamaisa things. Okay, if we had to give a rough translation of the word min, we would say a species. But the word that doesn't really do justice to it. Why is my thing working? Okay, so like the Shulchan Aruch says, there are things that are similar to each other. They have similar leaves or they have similar fruit, and so that says then they're considered the same min. They have the same kind of. There's certain things about them that are similar. The Rambam says if they have the same shaped leaves or they have the same nutritional value, they can be considered one min. Okay. Or the Rambam says if they have the same tree that goes in if you grow it in different countries, it'll grow different kind of fruits. That's also not; those are not Kilayim with each other. Then the Shulchan Aruch tells you something like this. He says, what if you have fruit? Lefes and Snoin are not Kilayim because the fruits are similar, and Lefes and Nafos, I don't know what any of these things are not because the leaves are similar. But Snoin and Nafos, those are two of the things in the mix over there. They are Kilayim with each other. Somehow they're Kilayim because they're too far apart from each other. So the two middles, the middle is connected to the outsides, but the two outsides are not. Okay, so it's a little complicated.
What are the rules? How do they judge this?
So the Chazon Ish says Chazal knew how to figure this out, and he says, and also there's some Ruach HaKodesh involved. Okay, that's what he said. So whatever that's supposed to mean, I don't know what we're supposed to do with that piece of information. Now that it involves
not everything is listed, right? So how do we?
That's correct. So the Ramah says. I'm sorry, I wanted to put this up, I forgot to. The Ramah says, most people don't know all these minim. Forget about it, they don't know all the minim that are not in the Mishnah, but they for sure don't know even the ones that are in the Mishnah. Okay, the Mishnayos have all kinds of listings, and most of them are like. Whenever you read that word, you say, "Okay, another vegetable and another vegetable." And, you don't know what you're talking about usually. But so the Rambam says, The Rambam says, so you should just be be very cautious. Like unless you're really sure, you should be very cautious. The Chazon Ish says, okay, maybe it's not so serious like that. Okay, the Chazon Ish says a certain amount we could use our judgment to say which things are similar to each other and which ones are not. And we're going to talk more details as we move along. Which ones we can and we can't. Okay. Okay, so
then, all for Eretz Yisrael?
No, this is v'chutz arts. I'm only talking about things that are v'chutz arts. In Kilayim of grafting trees is negate even the chutz arts. We're talking about if you graft.
Snowing trees made radish.
So actually, it happens to be that nowadays they actually graft vegetables. Also, I just was reading about this.
So you can't graft vegetables either.
Right, you can't graft anything. Okay, but I was showing this to you not to tell you whether this did actually probably, as you're right, for Eretz Yisrael. But I was just showing you how things could be how you compare one thing to another. How you say what's a min and what's not a min. Okay, so again, just to end our basics over here, is if you graft trees, if you in a way that's Kilayim, we'll talk about what that means soon. The fruit that grows on that tree is mutter. It's actually even mutter. You can even break off a branch off that tree and stick it into the ground. That's also mutter to do that. But there's an issur to keep the tree. Okay, and towards the end we're going to talk about that issur to keep the tree around. The Kilayim, you're not allowed to keep the tree around either. Okay, so you're not allowed to do the make the Kilayim, but the fruits that grows are fine. The branches themselves you could stick in the ground and plant them. But you're supposed to get rid of the tree, and we'll talk about this. Okay. Okay, so there's a din. We'll move a little away from the yard there for a minute. There's a din that if you have a fruit that is seasonal and you enjoy eating that fruit, then you make Shehechiyanu on that fruit. Okay, so there's a sefer, who says Efsher, that if you have a fruit that was made through Kilayim, that you should make a bracha on it. Shekol davar she'asu b'nei adam neged ratzon haboyrei, How can you say that I'm so happy that I came to this side, it's so wonderful that I came to this thing, to a thing that was against what Hashem wanted? Hashem doesn't want you to do Kilayim. I did Kilayim. So how can he says he doesn't say you can't. He says Efshur that you shouldn't be able to do that. Now, everybody who quotes it, like it's brought in the Behetiv and the Mishmur brings it also. They just say he says you're not allowed to make a Shehechiyanu. He doesn't actually say that. He says Efshur you shouldn't say that, but he's quoted as saying you shouldn't make a Shehechiyanu. They bring also the same place that the Yavitz held that you can make a Shehechiyanu. He says because Shehechiyanu L'maisa is, are you happy to eat this fruit? And yeah, you're happy to eat it. The fact that the issue was done is like maybe that bothers your conscience, but you're happy to eat this food.
So I'm
coming to Goyim in a second. Going to Goyim in a second. And he also has this hashkafa point, which we could. Could you open the door? We could agree or disagree about the hashkafa point. He says you don't think Hashem wants it? If Hashem didn't want it, it wouldn't have happened. So I don't know if that's. I'm not sure exactly the hashkafa part of that. I'm saying the Bereshit gives us bechiros. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but anyhow, he says you're happy. So he said so you're happy. Okay, so the Mishnah doesn't give a clear psak on this thing. Ramosha and Dainwai say you should be makbid. You should avoid making shehechiyanu on these kind of fruits. It's interesting in Shain Halachas, Chaim Kanievsky, he brings that it's okay to make a shehechiyanu. Okay, so they asked him, why did he say you're allowed to do that? Mishnah brings these 2 days. The Mishnah doesn't seem to say which way he thinks, one way or the other. So when they asked him why, and he said that the reason is because he says he thinks the maskana of the Mishnah is that it's mutter, and presumably he means because the second sheet he brings is the Yavitz who says that you can't make a shehechiyanu. Okay, it's not clear where he read into it, but that's what he says, that he read into the Mishnah that he thought that his maskana that it was mutter. It's bir halacha, it's not a Mishnah, it's a bir halacha. But so in Shain Halachas, and Chaim Kanievsky says you don't have to be makbid on this. But Everett Moshe and Daimai says that you should avoid. Okay, so
what does avoid mean?
You should not make a shehechiyanu on that kind of. Make shehechiyanu on something else if you have to. Okay, you should try not to make shehechiyanu on these fruits that are made through Kilayim.
Let's say that's all you have.
They don't tell you what to do then. They don't tell you what to do. Okay, so now the question is, what were they? Which fruit were they? What exactly is the fruit that I'm not supposed to make the shehechiyanu on that made through Kilayim? So, is it because someone was over an isser to make this fruit? That would be your first guess. The person was over an isser to make this fruit, so I shouldn't make shehechiyanu. So Dain Wai says, wait a second, Goyim are not mitzvah. He has a question about it, but the Pasha is Goyim are not mitzvah on Kilayim. He says, so if I go to the fruit store and I buy a fruit, in America, I don't know about him in Eretz Yisrael, but I buy a fruit, no one was over an isser. The guy who did it, he wasn't over an isser. So he says, no. He says, the point is not whether there was a technical violation of an isser entirely. It's not a technical violation. Is it neged ratzon habayre? The Bereshit doesn't want that to happen. He didn't restrict Goyim from doing that, but technically he doesn't really want that to happen. He doesn't want Kilayim to be made, and therefore he says so that's the person with neged ratzon habayre. Again, Hagan, which in itself is a chiddush because you think it's time-wise. So he said, in itself is a chiddush because if the person didn't answer to them, maybe he doesn't care if they do it. Okay, but
maybe that's how Hashem wants these to come into the world.
Right, that could be. You could say that. Okay, now.
Sorry, I came in late. He's talking about that a guy did it. The
yeah.
A guy,
no. The halachas katanas. No, he doesn't say what he's talking about. He doesn't say which case he's talking about.
That makes sense. He means
that's correct. You could say that, but in that way he says garment also. He says, but still, he says it was made neged ratzon habayre. Okay, so now what happens like this? What happens if someone made a tree? They grafted trees together in a way that was isser, and then the fruit that grows is mutter. I said before, and the fruit you're allowed to eat that fruit. What happens if someone took that fruit and they planted it in the ground, and a new tree grew out of that thing? Okay, so this tree that's growing now came about through grafting, but the tree itself didn't. Today they planted a tree and they grafted it and they made a tree be'isser. I won't make a shehechiyanu on that. And then they took an apple off of that tree, or they took something off. They planted that in the ground. And now a second tree grew from that one. Okay, so is there a problem? Is that also its history has Kilayim in it, but it itself is not Kilayim.
No, it must be including that. Otherwise,
what do you say?
It must be he meant to include that also, but otherwise it's not a gay. Hopefully it's not a gay.
Because
what, the original tree that we're talking about?
The tree in your backyard. In your backyard, you have a tree like that.
The tree that was actually grafted.
Right. So Rav Shlomo Zalman.
If you have a fruit, which is Kilayim, from the different fruits, the seed from that new fruit will keep creating
No, what I don't care what's going to grow out of it. The question is, it was made originally. This fruit came through being made in Kilayim, then it grew a tree that's like a second, like a grandchild from that.
What about a natural, like accidental?
Hopefully I'll get to that. So Rav Shlomo Zalman is quoted as saying that it's okay, you can make Shehechiyanu on the second fruit, not like Yossi. Okay? He says it's not a problem. So the whole shayla for the in which case we'll have to say that this halachas kanis is only talking about the Yumam. It's in your backyard. You have that tree. That's the problem. Okay, now like this, another case. Rav Moshe and Dayan Weiss are both talking about a fruit that they thought can only be created through Kilayim. Okay, they both talk about the same fruit, nectarines, which is everyone in the world thinks that nectarines are made from peaches and plums. It's not true. The scientists don't believe that. They say it's really made by it's just a mutation that peaches get mutated. It's just a mutation that they come out looking a little different. Okay, but they both believe it, so it's not relevant in truth, so to speak. But they're both talking about a thing that would happen. It couldn't happen by itself. Okay, and they're talking about a fruit that would never exist by itself. Later, I'll show you pictures of things that can't happen by themselves. So now what happens if I have that fruit? Okay, I have this, in their case, nectarine. Okay, so this one was not made through any grafting. Okay, it wasn't made through any grafting. But the whole fruit, the whole thing itself only exists because of grafting. We know that it's not an apple. It's something that never could exist unless someone once did a grafting. So do I make a shechin on that one or do I not make it? And
What's the difference between that and your previous question?
the previous question was, I made something to our cover, and what came out was an apple, just a good old-fashioned apple. I happened to have grafted it, but what came out is a normal, regular fruit that would have been like any other fruit. But that fruit was made through grafting, and then I planted it in the ground, and now more apples grew. Over here, we're talking about a fruit that the whole type of fruit doesn't exist unless you graft.
So the first one is like a loya hanumaisav type of thing.
Well, it's not as blatant going against what the Rosh wants to pick up an apple as it is compared to.
But this is not the original tree, right? This is the later.
No, it's the later one. It's a kind of fruit that could never ever exist unless. What did you say?
You just said it was. You said it's mutter. It wasn't done, so it's mutter.
So you're saying is you.
She said mutter. You can make it from a shehechiyanu.
You say you can make a shehechiyanu because it's not the original. So I thought you wouldn't because the whole existence of this fruit is neged ratzon habayir. We're looking at something that's something that shouldn't exist. Okay, it can only exist through hardcover.
Yeah,
it happened 3 steps ago. No, the apples are apples. There's nothing.
But
blatant,
this apple wouldn't have existed.
There's nothing blatant about apples that catches your attention. It's just.
That's not what that's kind of says. It says people did it. Negative Ratzon Habayir.
Okay, he says. That's true. But so this one is like staring you in the face that there's something wrong with this thing. You don't think so? Okay,
we can Kabbalah and the Kabbalah. I'm saying Chazal tells us.
No, this is just our own judgment of what it should be. Okay. So now to really understand what the real issur is for Kilayim and how it's going to apply back a little to Shehechiyanu, but really just to understand the issur of Kilayim. There are really two different ways to do. I keep the word using grafting, but that's a bad word because you're going to see. There are two ways that you can make Kilayim. Okay, two different ways. Okay, two different ways that harkava, we'll use that word, Jewish word. Harkava happen, two ways they happen. Okay, the first one is called grafting. Okay, so which is like this. And this is how most fruit trees, you would be surprised, but I've now found out, most fruit trees grow like this. Okay, and that is like this. You take a tree that you like, okay, a kind of fruit that you like, and you graft something that you like. The top is called the scion, I think I'll pronounce it correctly, S-C-I-O-N, onto a rootstock. Okay, so you take a kind of fruit that you like. The example I wrote down here, you want grapefruits. Okay, grapefruits is what you want. But you want to plant them on sour rootstock because sour roots do much better in the ground. They resist disease. They're good in growing in this environment. They're good as a plant. They're a much better plant than the grapefruit is. But the grapefruit is the fruit that you want. That's what you want to have. So you take a grapefruit, it's called a scion, I think that I'm pronouncing that correctly. The top is the grapefruit, and you attach that to a rootstock of sour orange, which is very common use as a rootstock, and you graft them together. What grows out of that tree will be 100% grapefruits. That's all that's going to grow out of this tree. Completely will grow grapefruits. But the physical tree itself will have properties of the sour orange, and it will be better at resisting these pests or heat or low moisture or whatever the kind of properties that you want from the rootstock. You get a rootstock that does what you want to grow well, that has all the properties to grow well, and then you attach that to your scion, which is going to grow the fruit that you want. Okay, so it does. The fruit is not going to be anything like sour oranges. It's going to be complete 100% grapefruits. Okay, that's what you're going to get is complete grapefruits out of the top. But it's going to have properties of the growing properties of the rootstock that you start with. Okay, so like it's resistant to drought. Okay, you like this that resistant to drought, but you want to grow grapefruits. You put these two together, and that's what you have. Okay, and Kamat, all fruit trees that you see grow like that. Okay, I spoke to
All fruits?
almost all fruit trees. I spoke
To cherries, to...
yeah, just listen. I spoke to nurseries, and you could go see it, and I could take you to Home Depot, and you could see it yourself. You could buy fruit trees, okay, and you could see it. You could see every one of those trees is grafted. Now, I did that. Lav Dafka is it grafted in a way that makes Kilayim. Okay, it could be apple and apple. In this case, I could instead of saying grapefruit and sour orange, which sounds to you like Kilayim, it might not be, but it sounds like Kilayim. But it could have been sweet orange on sour orange. Okay, just because the fruit that you want to eat is what's on top, and the fruit that the tree that you want to have, so to speak, is on bottom. Okay, and you mix them together in ways that make it work well. So now, there's give or take. I know this is going to sound very broad, and it's not 100% what I'm saying, but basically, there's three kinds of fruits that we deal with. Okay, I know it's going to sound strange. Of course, there are exceptions. You don't. Okay, and as a rule, they grow things based on in the same either genuses or things that have. So one group is a stone fruit. Okay, stone fruit are fruits that have a hard something in the center of it, or like a pit in the middle of it. So we have here apricots. I'm saying it out loud for anybody who's not here. Okay, apricots, almonds, cherries, nectarines, peaches, and plums. Okay, those all things have something hard in the center of it. Excuse me. That's one group. Those are they're called stone fruits. Okay, they have to have a. Okay, then there's citrus fruits. Okay, you know what citrus fruits are. All kinds of oranges and lemons and grapefruits and pomelo, things like that. Okay, esrog is part of that group. Okay, those are citrus fruits. Okay, and then the list is called pome fruits. Okay, those are there's a lot of seeds in the middle, and then the edible part is around it. Okay, we have here three of them: apples, pears, and quinces. Okay, so as a rule, grafting happens within each category. So grapefruit, I told you grapefruit will be on orange, or apricot will be on lemon. Apricot will be on peaches. So within its own group, pears are on quinces. So within its group, that's where the grafting tends to happen. Okay, so now, we're gonna work with an assumption. We're working with an assumption that at least in the stone fruits, which is a lot of our focus, stone fruits, any one of those is Kilayim with one of the other ones. Okay, that's the assumption. Like for example, I mentioned to you, Diane Weiss and Ramosha spoke about peaches and plums together. Okay, they made an assumption that they assumed that those were Kilayim with each other, and to make their day for what they called nectarines, which they thought was a Kilayim. They assumed it was Kilayim. And then there's a Mishnah. Okay, now I'm just going to tell you this part. It's not so relevant to us, just interesting. The Mishnah says that almonds and peaches are Kilayim with each other. Okay, and this is just an interesting machlokes. I just want to tell you, just for what it's worth. The Mishnah says hafarskim hashkedim, which most assume to mean peaches and almonds. Even though doimen zelazeh, the Kilayim zelazeh. Okay, so now what do peaches and almonds? Why are they doimen zelazeh? Okay, what do they have to? What are they similar to? They're similar, but they're still Kilayim. Okay, so there's a machlokes we're showing here, and I was like this. This is how almonds grow. Okay, like you see, like the pasuk says it, but you got to say it sits. Okay, it grows first as a flower, and then it grows going from left to right until it gets this like fuzzy stuff, like this like pulpy thing surrounding a nut, surrounding a shell which surrounds the nut. That's how almonds grow. And so the Rambam says that the farskin big katnai, when you have young peaches, when you see them on the tree, doimin l'shkedim begodlam, because they look like almonds as they go, as they're larger almonds. Okay, they're this fuzzy, growing, fleshy thing, and they look like peaches. And they have a similarity to books. Even so, often because the Mishnah says that they're Kilayim with each other. That's how the Rambam learns the Mishnah. The Rosh learns the Mishnah differently. He says, no, the parskin, the seed of a peach pit is similar to the almond shell. Okay, that's what the similar shell. Okay, it's not relevant to us. Important. I just wanted to tell you because I thought it was interesting machlokes. Anyhow, okay. So we have our fruits, and kamat, all fruit trees are made like this. And now, okay, so the okay, if you think, now go back to Shehechiyanu for a second. If you think that the halachas katanas only aser when you come with a brand new fruit, like what they thought was a nectarine, something brand new, then this type of grafting is not a shaila. Okay, because this normal type of grafting never creates new fruits. It doesn't make ever make something new. If you whatever the sign is, that's what you're going to grow. So the halachas katanas was not. I'm going to tell you a second type of grafting in a second, but this kind of grafting will never make
This is an actual tree.
What did you say?
We said that it's only a new fruit if it's not the same tree anymore when the issue wasn't done. But you tell me every time it happens, the issue was done.
Right.
So normal style applies to that.
If you held that he only answered it when it's a new type of fruit, that it wouldn't apply to this b'chlal. So if you no, he means for this case where the guy didn't isser and he grew a grapefruit on the top of the thing. That what?
Of course, Allah is referring to at least when the guy does the isser mamash,
Okay.
even without making any type of fruit. He says not one word about making any type of fruit. All he talks about is doing an isser. So you tell me talk about the other thing.
Masking. Okay, now masking. Okay, now. So now the question is: so I go to the store and I buy a new fruit and I want to know if I can make a shehechiyanu. Okay, so the question is: if I buy this new fruit, okay, it's now the season, and I bought an apricot, and I haven't had them this whole season. They're growing now in this time of the year. Can I make shehechiyanu on it?
We moved to the new fruits, right?
What did you say?
So we moved away from the normal fruits, which are the grapefruit, onto the sour orange.
No, they're all made through some kind of grafting.
So every fruit is basically every fruit you buy in the store.
But I don't know. Am I getting apricot that was on apricot? That's not Kilayim. It's okay to put apricot onto apricot. The question is, is the apricot that I picked up, is that made with Kilayim or is not made with Kilayim? Okay.
Right.
Okay. So the question is like this. So is it made like this? So the fact that it would be if apricot grew on peaches, the fact that I got a different, I got the apricot that I wanted, doesn't make a difference, right? That's just what you just said, which is I think is correct. But Lamaisa, the guy didn't isser to do it. Okay, so the question is now, I told you everybody goes within their shlab, within their section, so that you should know. You should just know there's a Chazanish who says he's not sure. He thinks that maybe all citrus fruits are considered not Kilayim with another. Okay, this is a suffix. Maybe all citrus fruits are not considered Kilayim with each other. He says he's masupik about that. They're so similar to each other. Maybe they're not Kilayim. But then, but now, okay. When I spoke to people who grow trees, like nurseries and the guys who sell in Home Depot, they say like this. They say like this. In the stone fruits, almonds are almost 3/4 of the time they grow them on peaches. Okay, and when they don't grow them on peaches, they grow them on peaches or plums. Okay, that's what they grow it on. Okay, now almonds you don't make shehechiyanu on, not relevant because almonds they grow in the season, but they're available year round, so we wouldn't make shehechiyanu on. But I'm just showing you what it's like that they grow them on other things. Apricots also grow almost always on peaches. Okay, and other times they grow on peaches and plums. Okay, then basically they never grow them on apricots. And peaches grow on peaches. Okay, peaches grow on peaches. Can you read that peach rootstock is really good for whatever reason that grows well.
They still graft them?
Yeah, because it's not. Well, me and you think a peach is a peach, but there's 100 types of peaches, and this peaches are good for the ground, or it's good for Chicago, or it's good for LA, wherever you're growing your peaches. It's good for this soil, or for this plant, or for this pest that's here, or for this whatever's going on. And when we were in California and we were looking at wine, they said all the grapes in America are grown on this and this rootstock because there was some kind of a problem, some kind of a bug or infection that came and killed all the grapes in America until they took, if I remember correctly, rootstocks from France. That was going to be the thing that was going to protect them from this thing. So everybody goes on this rootstock. Okay, so it can be peaches on peaches, but it's a specific kind of peaches. Okay, that the rootstock is a certain peach, and the peach, the sign, is the one that you want to eat. Okay, you decide you wanted only white peaches or orange peaches.
What does Kedem Winery do? They own the things. They can't tell the guy to graft.
So how do they get their grapes?
Yeah.
What's the problem? It's grape and grape.
Right, if it's grape and grape, they're good. Okay, and the truth, they probably don't own the grapes. I don't know if they own grapes, but I don't know if they own grapes or not, but you're right. It's grapes on grapes. Now, they told me, they said let me go back for a second, okay? Let me just go, whoops. In the citrus fruit, there's a lot of grafting. A lot of people work on orange, but pretty much pretty much what I look, if I got it correctly, everyone's staying with their own fruit. Okay, the fruit it'll be orange on orange or lemon on lemon, in a lot of them. In the pome fruits, in the apples and pears, but they're a klal. They plant them onto themselves, except with one exception, which is if you want to grow pears in your backyard and you don't want a tree that's too big, okay, you want the tree to not grow too big, then they grow the pears on quinces, because the quinces keep the tree from getting too big. Here, instead of it being good, you want it to be not so good. Okay, people don't want this tree that overwhelms their backyard, so they grow it on quinces. So a person in their backyard buys a pear tree, then they may have Kilayim. As opposed to if you buy pear in the store, the pears in the store, they grow probably as big as they want to, they're going to grow them on pears. But the problems come with the stone fruits. Okay, the stone fruits that grow on all kinds of other stuff, which is a more serious issue of Kilayim.
We're assuming that it's Pashat there's an Isser Kilayim when you do the sign with the rootstock. Is that questionable or
not questionable to me? You tell me what's your question. No, to me that was pretty straightforward. That's what like a classic client to me. I mean, to me that was classic. What I'm going to talk about in a second is less obvious.
We're not editing genes back in times of Chazal.
No, we're going to come to the less common in a second. Less common for people in a second, which is a shaila, but this I thought was more clear that this is Kilayim.
And the only problem we're talking about is Shehechiyanu.
No, because well, yes, for right now we're talking about Shehechiyanu, okay, but the we're gonna talk about in a minute if I have time. We're gonna talk in a minute about what happens if I have a tree in my backyard. Okay, I remember I told you this in Istim Kilayim. Okay, so I have a tree in my backyard. Am I allowed to keep that tree in my backyard when I don't know what it was growing on? Okay, what
if you buy a tree? Yeah, you buy one of these trees like at Home Depot.
Correct. So it happens to be the guys at Home Depot. The people at Home Depot don't know anything. The people who make the tree, who grow the trees for Home Depot, told me they sell their apple and pear, if I remember correctly. And they told me, yeah, we always grow apple on apple, which seems accurate, and pear we're always growing on itself. But I went to other stores. Went to a different place, and they go
and pears. What about other trees?
That's what they're selling there. Home Depot doesn't have such a big variety.
But you can order.
I went to a different place. I passed another place. I was visiting a company. I passed another place, and I stopped in there. Some garden center, and they have a zillion types. You can buy cherries and apricots. You can buy every kind of things like that. And there, it's like almost impossible to know what it is. You could try. It's hard to dig it up. So we're going to talk about that in a minute. We're going to talk about if I have time. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Okay. Okay. Now, but the other kind, what I described to you is how you grow trees when you want to get fruit. Okay, when you want to have fruit, you want to grow a farm of peaches. This is what you're going to do. You can go to the nursery. They give you peach plants, or you go to grapes, or 100 other things. I have other fruits down here that I didn't mention. And you go to them, and you say to them, "Give me a little plant of it." You don't start with the little plant. You go to the nursery, they give you the little plant, you put it into the ground, and you grow a farm of apricots or almonds or whatever you want to grow. Okay, that's how people in their backyards who want to have trees. But there's a whole nother way of doing breeding. And that is called not grafting, but breeding, crossbreeding. Okay, and that's we're not taking two pieces of tree and attaching them to each other. We're taking pollen from one tree and we're putting it into the stigma of another tree. Okay, we're taking the pollen from one tree to another tree. There are some achronim who thought maybe that's not Kilayim. Okay, I don't have time for this now. I'm just going to tell you the Chazon says it is. It seems it was a whole to do in the 50s or the 40s. In the 40s, a whole to do. The Chazon said no. Anything that helps the plant grow. You know the reason to it's not Kilayim is because the pollen can't grow. There's nothing about the pollen. If you stick pollen in the ground, nothing's going to happen. It's not going to grow. So there's some people in the Chazon said no. Anything that has to do with the growth is considered Kilayim. There's a mission about fertilizer. That's not Kilayim. Like fertilizer from one tree to another. But anything that helps in the growing itself, like pollen, the Chazon said is Kilayim. So we assume that's Kilayim. So now that. When you do that, when you move the pollen from one tree into the plant, the flower of another tree, then you cross the genetic material and you get new fruits. You get new things grow out of that. Okay, that's what creates new types of fruits. What we took till now, the grafting doesn't create new fruits. It's the same fruit. You get oranges out of oranges, but this creates new kinds of fruits of that. For example, you probably have heard by now of Honeycrisp apples. Okay, what are Honeycrisp apples? So they made them started with a Makun apple, okay, which the apple ranking says is barely worth eating, okay? But now they like the color and they're crunchier, and they took that together with honey gold apples, which apple ranking says is horse food. okay, but honey gold apples can handle really cold weather. Okay, now this was done in Michigan. Okay, where it's pretty cold. I think it's in Michigan. Minnesota, University of Minnesota. Okay, where it's really cold. They wanted to be able to grow apples. Well, regular apples won't grow there, so they crossed these. They switched pollen from one to the other to grow them, and what they ended up with was Honeycrisp apples that the guy says mama's perfect. Okay, wow. Now, it didn't happen was that the guy went one day and said, hey, let's try mixing Macoun apples with honey gold, and boom, that's what came out. No. It takes hundreds of tries, which is to say it's total, random. They mix things together, they see what happens. Then they plant, what happens is they mix them together, then they plant, see what grows out of that tree, then they plant them, they wait a little bit till new fruits grow out. It takes for a very long time to see what would come out of it. So Honeycrisp apples didn't happen one day. A guy said, hey, let's try mixing these two together, and the next day they had Honeycrisp apples. No, it took hundreds and hundreds of tries of mixing those together. They had this idea to mix them together, but it takes hundreds of tries before they got the one that they wanted. Okay, now.
And all the ones using their.
Say again?
And everyone's using their prototype, so to speak.
So now the reason why I'm saying that, aside just the interesting, is that because after they got the one that they like, okay, they ended up and they said, this is the one we wanted. They patented it, okay, this is the one that we want to. The next time they wanted to make Honeycrisp apples, they didn't mix Macouns and Honeygolds. It doesn't work like that because they just get a bunch of failures. Okay, what they did is then they take cuttings from Honeycrisp apples and what do you think they do with them? They graft them onto other apples. Okay, they graft pieces from the trees onto other apples so they could grow more Honeycrisps. Okay, and then after hundreds of tries, they went through many layers and years of trying. They finally came out with the apple that they said, this is the one. We found it. The mom is the one that we think is 95. Okay, it's almost perfect. We found the one that we like. From then on, there's no more crossbreeding. Okay,
So it's grafted in.
Yes, but the crossbreeding happens like in a research center, in a university. It's happening. Somebody's working on it. There are people all over the place. I don't have the guy here. I think maybe he's Jewish. A guy who developed hundreds of things. He's sitting there all day trying to mix different things together and see what comes up out of it. But when they finally get the one that they like, that's the end of the breeding. There's no more breeding at that point. At that point, they're just putting it onto new rootstock to make more and more Honeycrisps or whatever they were trying to make out.
If a Jew does this and he's a mamash over in sir, is there any issue with eating the fruits?
No, there's no Shulchan Aruch. You're allowed to eat the fruit. And I told you, you're even allowed to cut the branches off and plant them in the ground. Messiah, because you encourage him by eating the fruit. Okay, take it up. I don't know what to tell you.
This is not a climb, right? This is the apple and apple.
The what?
Two types of apples.
No, in this case, I'm trying to just show you how you make new fruits, and we'll come into climb cases in a second. Okay, so now the question is like this. Okay, so I told you, so you don't have to worry about making Shehechiyanu or worrying about climb for these things. So by the time you get the Honeycrisp, it's 100 steps later. But here's the question like this. Imagine the Honeycrisp is not going to be a good example. I'm going to give you a different example. Okay, this is from the original slide that I showed you. Okay, we take apricots and plums. Okay, take apricot and plum. This is the original slide, just in better, with more versions of it. Okay, and we mix them together. So there's different ways to breed them. Okay, one breed, if we make mainly plum, we get something called a pluot. Okay, you could actually buy what I'm showing you here. You could buy in the store. Okay, you get a pluot. Okay, if you do mostly apricot, you get apriums. Okay, and if you do half and half, you get a plum cut. Okay,
Is this a real thing?
these are all real. All these things you can buy in the store. I was thinking of buying them, bringing them in to show them to you. Okay, you buy some of these you can even buy in Sam's Club. You could literally buy. You go to Jewel, we could buy all these. Okay, so we have all these different versions depending on how much of each one there is. Okay, so depending on the yichus. So now the question is like this. Now I grew an aprium. Okay, we'll use that as our example. I grew an aprium. Okay, and after they finally got the magic one, they got the one that they love, that they think, okay, this is going to be the one that people are going to eat. Okay, now they put it onto a rootstock. Is it not automatically climbing? What are they going to put it onto? Should they if they put it onto an apricot or onto a plum, it's not going onto itself. It's for sure not going onto apriums, right? It's going onto something else. So is it automatically climbed because whatever they're going to put it onto is not going to be it. It's not going to be an apricot. It's not if it puts onto apricot or onto plum. It's not either one of those things. Okay, so which one could they put it onto? Or is it automatic that if I go into the store and I buy an aprium, I'm automatically buying a climb fruit? Okay, because
and you're going like Shlomo Zalman, that if the tree I got from was not Be'eser, then there's no issue.
Right.
The question just is, maybe that tree.
The tree itself. I'm saying is it automatically Be'eser?
Talking about Kilayim.
No, I'm talking about to make Shehechiyanu on it, or kind. Because if I get the apium, I know that it had to have been grafted. It was grafted. All fruits are grafted, but when apium was grafted, what did they graft it onto? Not onto another apium. They planted on either the plum or apricot, or actually they planted on the peaches. That's the truth. They put on the peaches. Don't tell anybody yet. But if they want to put on the apricot or plum, what's my choice? It's not automatic that it's going to be so the Kashrus talks about it, okay, not about apiums. Kashrus talks about it for esrog. He says if I have an esrog murkav, which are you allowed to plant that onto an so forget about what you use it for the mitzvah. Can you plant that onto an esrog or onto a lemon? It's a mix of an esrog and a lemon. Which one is the one that I'm allowed to or not allowed to plant it onto? So the Kashrus says, he says like this. He says,
I'm sorry, didn't he say they're not all citrus are not climbs over there?
yeah, he says, Mesupik, maybe it's not climb. This is like on the side. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. He says, but assuming that it would be a problem, he says, which one should we plant it onto? So he says like this. He says, we saw way at the beginning that the Rambam says, we judge, in Shulchan Aruch also, we judge Kilayim a lot by its physical characteristics. Okay? He says, so, look at the fruit. The esrog murkav basically looks like an esrog. If it basically looks like an esrog, then it's an esrog. For these purposes, it's an esrog. So you could graft it onto esrog, you can't graft it onto lemon. Hagan that it came from both. But look at the final result. The final result looks basically like an esrog. Okay, it's basically an esrog, and therefore we plant it onto an esrog. So in our case, if we have an apium, which they tell me is 3/4 apricot, okay, and it has the physical property says basically it looks like an apricot with just some plum features, but basically it looks like an apricot. So then he would say, if you wanted to plant it, you should plant it onto an apricot. If you went to the other side of the scale, if you had the pluots, okay, which presumably are more plumish than they are apricot, if you put them, they said basically this thing is a funny plum, okay, but it's a plum, then you'd be allowed to graft it onto plum, not onto apricot.
Now we don't know for sure that an apricot and a plum is maybe not climb altogether.
So I that's why I said a few minutes ago was that we work with the assumption that they are, and I told it to you based on Ramesh and Dynamite both thought that peaches and plums were Kilayim. So some of these apricot and plums may be a little closer, and I don't know how to judge it. I don't have Ruach HaKodesh. I don't tell people if I have Ruach HaKodesh. Okay, so whether it is or is not, we work with the assumption that it is. Okay, okay. So now, so it happens to be it actually goes on peaches, so you shouldn't make Shehechiyanu. Okay, so you shouldn't make Shehechiyanu. But anyhow, so
apricot, not just on apium, plum, cut, and plum.
well, on a lot of them, right? But on the apiums, I'm thinking it's most boiling. That there's something funny about this thing. This is not a regular. Okay. Okay, so I was going to talk about Mekayim Kilayim. It's very late. Okay, so I'm not going to talk about Mekayim Kilayim to a different time. Anyhow, so just to summarize because I didn't finish. When there's crossbreeding going on, be'etzem, crossbreeding doesn't affect us being able to say Shehechiyanu or worrying about the Kilayim of it because the crossbreeding happened many generations ago. Okay, by the time I'm getting the fruit that I'm getting is not the one that was actually crossbreeded. But I have to worry about the other part of it, the grafting part of it, which is the crossbreed for sure was grafted, even if you think that apples are not grafted, even if you mistakenly think that, but even if you think that, the crossbreed for sure is grafted because they won't take the chance of planting that in the ground and starting again from scratch. So then we have to think about, is it Kilayim because of the way that part of it